So I finally finished The Witcher 3, and by that I mean I finally completed both the main game and its two expansions, Hearts of Stone and Blood and Wine. It's been a very long journey since my adventure first began on launch day in May 2015. The game, its world, and its characters have been such a present part of my life over the last 2 years that to suddenly have my time with Geralt end left me feeling hollow. It was like I just said goodbye to a good friend. And though I suppose the almost 200 hours I spent with that virtual amigo have a great deal to do with that hollowness, there are many very long games out there to play, and none of them have left me feeling like I did when the credits rolled on my time with Geralt. So what was it about The Witcher 3 that made it so special? How did CD Projekt Red create a virtual world that I now miss so dearly? Well, like most of the games I love, it all comes down to story, and The Witcher 3's sells you on its world like no other game before it. The Witcher 3 structures its main story around 4 major acts. Acts 1 to 3 all have to do with the hunt for Ciri, and that hunt takes you across 3 major areas: the battlefields of Velen, the metropolis of Novigrad, and the stormy isles of Skellige. Act 4 starts when you finally find Ciri, and focuses on her quest to vanquish the Wild Hunt and the apocalyptic age of the White Frost. Every act has its own story arcs, major characters, and conflicts. Whether it's the Bloody Baron's cursed family, Novigrad's street gangs and racism, or Skellige's political struggle for the throne, each act has a distinct beginning, middle, and end. And the story of that act stands apart from the overarching story about finding Ciri. Effectively, these individual acts end up feeling a lot like seasons on a TV show, and that makes the game exceedingly easy to put down and then pick back up after a few months. Between my playthroughs of Acts 2 and 3, work started getting incredibly hectic, and I couldn't find the time to play the game for more than 6 months. But when I got back, I felt like the game had just been on its season break. It was back now, and the adventures of Geralt could continue in a new land. This structure, where the game essentially tells 4 unique stories during its runtime, lends the world and characters a sense of depth and reality that many other games struggle with. Games that stick to more standard story conventions typically drag out what could be a 4 to 5 hour story into a longer 12-hour ordeal. They whisk you from location to location, set piece to set piece, without ever allowing the world itself to build an identity. And that's because most games make you the chosen one, king or other supreme being. Their stories and worlds revolve around your character. You are the center of the game. But in The Witcher 3, you're just a dad looking for his daughter, and you hunt monsters to make money. The world and the characters within it exist with or without you. Skellige's political conflicts would have been resolved even if Geralt had never sailed to the islands. And the sorceress Triss would have rescued persecuted mages even without Geralt's help. The Witcher 3 uses its acts to insert Geralt into different places and situations, where many of the goals and conflicts are already in motion. And when you leave to continue on your quest to find Ciri, those places and characters go on living without the need of your influence. It's a bit of a trite comparison, but Geralt's story is almost reminiscent of old TV shows like Xena, Warrior Princess, and Hercules. He wanders from place to place, solving the occasional problem, and then he leaves those places behind. The season ends, and you'll have to tune in next time to see where he goes next. Of course, there is one big drawback to this kind of storytelling, and that's that our primary villains, the Wild Hunt, rarely make their presence felt until the closing act of the game. But in this case, that's a flaw I'm willing to accept. It's not just in telling its main story that The Witcher 3 excels. The game succeeds in building its world and characters because just as much care went into crafting the optional side content as with the primary narrative. As I mentioned before, Geralt is a monster hunter, and every optional activity you take part in during the game centers on playing that role. Contracts to kill local creatures hang up on town boards. You can gamble to try and make that extra bit of cash for armor repairs, and you explore forgotten ruins in the search of lost knowledge that will help you better arm yourself against the monsters of the world. People react to you differently. Some will treat you like a lowly outsider, turning their noses up at you, all while demanding you solve their problems. Others are so desperate that they have to beg for your help, as they can't offer much in reward. The more involved side quests can embroil you in complex politics, tell dramatic tragedies, or delve deeper into characters close to Geralt. But even the more basic quests, the ones that just tell you to go out and kill a thing, always involve a final complication or tidbit of world-building information. Whether it's the letters bandits write home from their camps, werewolves who have tried to live in the woods to protect the innocent, or a dead witcher who sold all his gear because of his gambling debts. Almost every single thing you do in the game justifies its existence with story. The only real exception are those damn smuggler caches in Skellige, floating barrels full of items that rarely add much of value. This is the only time the game's side activities feel as shallow as those you might find in a current Ubisoft game. And it's why Skellige is the only place I haven't fully explored. But everywhere else, the world stories feel like they surround you. The ambient dialogue from peasants, the way cats hiss as you walk by, and even the Gwent minigame that's as addictive as the main game all contribute to a world that feels alive. You may be wondering why, in a video about story, I'm including a section on gameplay. Well, that's because unlike a lot of games, The Witcher 3 does not suffer from ludonarrative dissonance. Now, if you're wondering what that is, it's when there's a huge amount of conflict between what the game presents as its narrative and what it presents as its gameplay. The most commonly cited example of this is the Uncharted series, where the happy-go-lucky Nathan Drake hunts treasures and engages in witty banter with his buddies during the story, but ruthlessly mows down hundreds of people without a second thought in the gameplay. But in The Witcher, every aspect of gameplay is part of the story. While you may roll your eyes at the notion of health potions and force pushes being game concepts that came from a story-first perspective, those concepts were actually born of the novels the game is based on. In the world of The Witcher, Witchers go through mutations that allow them to survive using toxic potions and to harness the power of some simple magic. Even the game's combat reflects your own journey as a Witcher. When you start, combat is very challenging, especially as you experiment to discover the strengths and weaknesses of all the game's monsters. An early encounter with a griffin feels like an incredibly daunting task. But by the time you're wrapping up Geralt's story, even those flying foes feel like less of a threat. If you mess up, you will still die, but your knowledge and familiarity with fighting monsters will lend you a sense of deliberate confidence. It's been there, done that, rather than, help, it's so scary! And that's exactly how it should feel for an experienced Witcher. It's just another day on the job. What CD Projekt Red have understood since the first Witcher video game is that at the core of any great story is a cast of great characters. And they've carried that philosophy with them through both The Witcher 2 and The Witcher 3. But this understanding benefits strongly from The Witcher 3's act structure. Where previous games generally featured the same cast throughout, here each different part of the game's story focuses right in on a certain character or group of characters. Act 1 in Velen hides the remnants of The Witcher 2's ancillary characters, with Vernon Roach and Letho each having detailed questlines there. Act 2 and Novigrad put a strong spotlight on Geralt's relationships that we've known from previous games. We see Dandelion move past his womanizing ways, help Zoltan establish himself as a businessman, and see how Triss has morphed from power-hungry manipulator to selfless rebel who would put her life on the line for others. We get to spend a great deal of time with these guys, firmly cementing the love and camaraderie we feel for them. Then Act 3 moves on to Yennefer. She has a whole act mostly to herself, and that's because she hasn't appeared in previous games, yet she has a lot of history with Geralt in the novels. Here we see that despite her often abrasive attitude, she genuinely loves both Geralt and Ciri, and would probably let the world burn if it would save the pair of them. Finally, Act 4. This is where we get to spend time with Geralt's adopted daughter, Ciri, and I can't stress enough how outstanding a job CD Projekt Red did in developing her character. Over the course of the game, you get brief moments where you play as Ciri, and in those moments, not only do you see how she's a kind, empathetic young woman, you also see she's a badass who can cut monsters and criminals down with ease. This already means that you'll like her when you do finally find her, but what the game does afterwards exceeds even that. They truly place you, as Geralt, in the shoes of her father. You can tell she adores you, and at pivotal moments in Act 4, she turns to you for advice or comfort. Here you can play the role of a supportive dad, or an overprotective one, or, if you're a total asshole, a deadbeat who'd trade her in for a pile of money. But when you go the supportive path, standing by her when she wants to confront bigoted villagers, or comforting her after the loss of a friend, the game really makes you feel like a proud dad. It's such a strong connection that when she went to face the White Frost, I was wringing my hands with worry. And when she turned up at my villa at the end of Blood and Wine, I was so happy I'd made the mistake of romancing both Triss and Yennefer. And that's because I'd much rather have Ciri with me at the end than either romantic interest in the game. And I think that's a testament to how strongly written that bond between father and daughter is. But with this long, heartfelt rant over, it's safe to say CD Projekt understand the value of strong characters. Whether you're adventuring with them, or getting drunk and making prank calls using Yennefer's magical phone, the time spent with these virtual pixels on a screen elicits genuine, and sometimes overwhelming, emotion. Geralt's story is done. It's over. The developers have made it clear that even if they do go back to the world of The Witcher, they're not going back to the character. And so I feel a little empty inside, knowing that this was the last goodbye. My journey with this game series started with the first game back in 2007, and the world and characters have enraptured me ever since. Over the course of 3 games, CD Projekt created something truly remarkable. They built a world where decisions carried over from game to game. They expanded on characters, allowing them to truly develop and change over time, and they told even the most complex political stories in deeply personal ways. It's not just about killing monsters, it's about making friends along the way. It's not about saving the world, it's about protecting those you love. It's about Geralt, and it's about those he fights for. That's the world of The Witcher, and I miss it so much already.
Some fight for glory, justice, or gold. I fight for those I hold dear. I'm Geralt of Rivia, the Witcher.